Hi, everyone. Welcome officially. Thank you for joining us virtually today. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading, especially because we are featuring the 2023 and 2024 winners of Atmosphere's very own Playa Flamingo Writing Residency. We're going to be hearing from Carlos Andrés Gómez, Allyson Barkley, and Ebony Stewart, all of whom will be reading from their recent work, which was developed in part at the residency. The Playa Flamingo Writing Residency is a 5-day writing program at a beachside private condo in Costa Rica. Included in the residency is the time and space to get your creative juices flowing, lodging at the condo for 5 nights, and 1 to 2 virtual editorial coaching sessions. Those are with an Atmosphere Press editor, so that's to discuss the writing project. We're currently accepting applications for the 2025 Playa Flamingo Writing Residency, and we're looking for motivated writers who we think are going to take a promising voice to a new level through access to a new space, some beautiful beachside beauty, and a different culture and language as well. We find that having an active project to work on during the residency really helps refine the focus and make the time most worthwhile. The application for this year's residency is due by this Friday, February 28th. So do be sure to apply for your chance to attend. I'm also going to put the link to the application in the chat for everybody. But back to this event, at the end of the readings, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, go ahead and type any questions you think of in the chat, and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to also use the chat for praise and comments that you'd like to share. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. And of course, we are always looking for new, exciting manuscripts. So if you've got one of your own, we would love to read it, and you can submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Carlos, Allyson, and Ebony today. Our first reader, who we're going to start off with, is Carlos Andrés Gómez. Carlos is an award-winning Colombian American poet, speaker, and actor. He's the author of the poetry collection Fractures, selected by Natasha Trethway as the winner of the Felix Pollock Prize in Poetry and winner of the Rubry International Book Award. He's the recipient of the Sandy Crimmins National Prize for Poetry, Atlanta Review International Poetry Prize, Forward Indies Gold Medal, and the International Book Award for Poetry, as well as receiving fellowships from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Voices of Our Nation Arts Foundation, and the Jerome Foundation. His writing has been published in the New England Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, the Yale Review, BuzzFeed, the Sunday Times, Smartish Pace, The Guardian, Poetry Unbound, 50 Poems to Open Your World, and elsewhere. So with that, I am so excited to welcome Carlos.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ebony. Big thank you to Hala Alawi, everybody from Atmosphere Press, Dr. Nick Courtwright. Appreciate you all so much. Thank you all for being here. Wonderful attendees and whoever's tuning in later. Thank you, Jean, Tony, Gregory, Joy, Brooke, Brandon, Shaki, Anastasia, Rachel, Masaki, and Carrie. I hope I didn't forget somebody. Did I say your name, Brooke? Brandon, appreciate you. It's such a joy to be here. This residency was so, I know, I'm sure Ebony and Allyson will talk about this, but yeah, I took a huge leap in my poetry manuscript that I've been developing. And one of the biggest leaps possible in 5 days. So if you're a prose writer, poetry writer, whatever genre you write in, I couldn't recommend more you applying to the fellowship. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but yeah, highly recommend it. So I'm going to read some poems, and they're from my forthcoming manuscript, from my poetry manuscript titled Where Language Ends. And this is a poem called Aperture, and it goes like this. The perfume lady at the department store teased and marveled at my long eyelashes, said they looked like I'd just come from the beauty salon. My smirking aunts held the word beautiful to my face like a mirror or blade. So I balanced on the sink of my parents' bathroom, scissors the distance of a butterfly's closed wing from my iris, and snipped. As the lashes fell, I felt something else leave me, marveled at the guilty hand now trembling attached to my body. Growth is a trauma, my mentor in grad school once told me, as though violence is a rite of passage, as though violence makes possible who we are meant to become. I argue with a friend about helicopter parenting, the necessity of hardship to build character, how much damage I might cause if I try to protect my kids from the litanies of griefs and traumas I have survived. Did I? When I retell the story of my daughter's birth, our first moment together is the only plot detail that remains the same each time. I now skip how close she came to suffocating on the tangled umbilical cord, how quickly her heart rate suddenly dropped, the way she didn't make a sound initially, and I felt like my pulse might stop. It's the moment she looked up, those familiar lengthy eyelashes, cartoonish on a newborn, out of the chaos of nearly leaving the world before she entered it, out of the bright lights and whir of machines, brushed my face in a slowed rhythm until her eyes closed. A lot of these poems are reflecting on the limitations of language, which is to say, I'm pretty much setting myself up to fail with this book. The ways in which language is inadequate, is mistranslated, whether it's across language or within language, or the ways language can't translate what you feel or what you experience or what you're trying to make sense of. So I feel like I'm trying to create a language for the unsayable. And so a lot of that is wrestling with that. When it comes to collisions and fracture points in society or within ourselves, and being a parent to two kids, a lot of it is reflecting on what that means to be a father, and also to be a father to two Black Colombian kids growing up in America today. And this is the titular poem of the collection, and it is called "Where Language Ends," and it goes like this. Where language ends, after Keith Leonard. What is found beyond language, where one tongue withholds from another? In Japanese, there is a single word that means finding beauty in imperfections. Linguists think the word bully evolved from the Dutch word boel, meaning lover. The word awful meant full of awe. I listened to old recordings of myself at 3 telling my sister secrets in a language I no longer speak, in Farsi. There is no direct equivalent to "I love you." Instead, the commonly used phrase literally translates to "I know you as my friend, my friends." I do not know the precise day my first language fully left me, but I recall relishing its familiar music like a muffled eavesdrop against a door. I listened to my parents argue as a small child in a language I thought I knew. I would hear each word clearly, but could not make out a single word's meaning. I wonder if the poems matter at all in German. There's a single word to describe a face badly in need of a fist in Norwegian. The euphoria you feel as you begin to fall in love. When I comfort my love, the first time she encounters death unexpected, it is the sturdy haven of my arms and chest. Only the vernacular of touch keeps her from the floor. In Brazilian Portuguese, There is a single word for tenderly running your fingers through your lover's hair. I'm not writing a poem. I'm running my hands through her hair on days like today when the stanza feels like the most suffocating room. I part and braid the hair of my beloved. Fingers detangle strands into smooth lines like the arteries of a map. I inhale the scent of essential oils and shea butter. And there, peering around the corner, a dialect of 6-year-old irises, carried through generations, across oceans, the marvel and loss and rebirth of language where absence became the brutal miracle from which lineage was drawn. Our daughter is up past her bedtime, tracing her mother's crown carefully for the first time with her eyes as though it were a smuggled book teaching her to speak. I have 2 more short poems left. I just want to give a shout out first to one of my favorite living writers and people, Ebony Stewart, who has an incredible new collection that just came out called Wash that everyone should just go buy right now. So Google Ebony Stewart if you don't know Ebony already, who won this the first time around and is the reason I applied. Um, and also, please go look up, if you don't know Allyson Barkley's work, she has her book, A Memory of Light. You got to go get that and support Atmosphere Press. Again, huge thank you to Dr. Courtwright and Hala for making this possible and the whole team there. So definitely apply and spread the word. It's an incredible residency. I know Ebony and Allyson will talk about this, but I showed up and I saw the housing, like the accommodations, and I was like, is this serious? It was like multiple rooms, very fancy, my own like little like deck with a grill, a pool, a private beach. Like, I don't know of things that exist like this in the world that I live in, that maybe other people do. So yeah, it's incredible. I'd spend my days just like writing, revising, reading. I'd hit a wall, I'd go for a swim, walk to the private beach and walk back, and then be like reset. Um, Mind blowing. So please definitely apply. And Costa Rica is incredible. Pura vida, like do it. um, so this poem, some of you may be familiar with A Golden Shovel. It's a form that one of my favorite writers of all time, Terrence Hayes, invented. I think it was like 15 years ago. Someone's going to fact check me. Don't quote me on that. I think it's about 15 years ago. And the idea is the end of each line is in sequence. Well, he did it from a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, but you can do it from an excerpt of a song or a quote from somebody. And the idea is you take that and make kind of a found poem in sequence with every line ending from another writer's poem or excerpt from something or a song or something else. And so what I did was I did a double golden shovel. So every line begins and ends um, in sequence with the lines from an Ezra Pound poem called In a Station of the Metro. And it's a 14-line poem. And I created like a contemporary American sonnet in sequence out of the lines from that Ezra Pound poem. And this is a double golden shovel sonnet found on the Q train. I'm sure other people have written double golden shovel sonnets, so don't give me credit for this. I mean, maybe not a sonnet, but they've definitely done double golden shovels. I'm sure. But this is from the new collection too. This is double golden shovel sonnet found on the Q train after Ezra Pound's In a Station of the Metro. The held-tight scowl familiar is lost, as though the apparition from me. I'm going to start again. The held-tight scowl familiar is lost, as though the apparition across from me is an old mirror. Apparition of the ghost who haunts my many masks, a maid of these postures and poses, wide-chested, cloaked, these faces trained towards sneer or absence. A baby makes faces in between me and the man now clutching my gaze. In the slowed moment our subway car's air shifts, I feel the crowd retract. Seats change. A street vendor in the crowd peddles single roses, $1 each. He drops petals on the ground beside the elderly man singing Te amaré on a falsetto climb to the top of the chorus. He transports me. A wet grief pulls my eyes. The old mirror is suddenly close. Wet, black eyes before me. Music has opened us both. A black bow made young. You drop this, he offers with a bow. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Carlos. And I mean, we can already see the response in the chat, but that was really such a beautiful reading. And thank you so much for giving that and also for your comments on the residency. That was lovely. So reading next today is Allyson S. Barkley. Allyson is the author of the acclaimed Until the Stars Are Dead fantasy series. Both A Memory of Light and A Vision in Smoke have received prestigious Kirkus stars for works of exceptional quality. Born in Charlottesville, Virginia, Allyson grew up an avid reader, writer, and horseback rider. She earned a degree in global studies and Hispanic literatures and cultures from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Now she lives in Durham, North Carolina, with her husband and their 2 cats. Today, Allyson's reading will come from an early chapter in the 3rd book of her series. This is the book she worked on while she was in Costa Rica, with the draft tracking the finish very soon, which is very exciting. The book jumps between 3 perspectives, and this chapter is focusing on just one POV, so we can really get into the character. And I'll let Allyson take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Hala, for organizing us. Carlos, that was incredible. It's going to be tough to follow. But you all, I have sort of like a poet sandwich here. So you guys are going to get a very different genre of writing for my turn. But like Hala was saying, this is the 3rd book in the series. I tried to pick something that didn't take too much context to follow. But this particular chapter actually follows not our primary character, but 2 other central characters who are siblings, and sort of explores some of their sibling dynamic. And here we go, getting it pulled up. All right. They took a pair of horses out past the edge of camp and over the next hill. When Eli could no longer feel the remnants of the sorceress's magic and Dinar felt comfortably out of Third Army earshot, they stopped and dismounted, tying the horses to a nearby bush so they could sit in the grass and talk. The sky was a brilliant blue, brushed with wisps of white cloud. Eli settled back, stretching his long legs out over the earth. He took a deep breath and enjoyed the breeze cutting through the heat, the gift of the sun on his skin. His mind was buzzing with a million scattered thoughts. Ari, the sorceress, the siege. But he had to appreciate this moment, sitting with his sister and looking over the northern hills. Her name is Mordez, Dinar said. Eli glanced over at her. She had tugged off her boots and socks. As she spoke, she pushed her feet forward through the grass, watching it run over her bare toes. The general invited her into camp to discuss an alliance. He met with her alone. Dinar's voice was tight. I only arrived at the end, but it seems they have come to some sort of agreement. It is unclear what that entails. This is good, though, Eli said. This is what we wanted. Maybe. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know. She wiggled her toes. Don't do this, Dinar. His tone was sharp enough to draw her gaze from the grass to his face. She met his eye defiantly. Are you feigning misunderstanding? She challenged. Or do you honestly need me to explain this to you? Eli's chest squeezed uncomfortably. We made a promise back in Telenu, he said slowly, doing his best to keep his words from running away from him. I will try harder to understand you. You will try harder to explain your feelings. Dinar looked at him for a long time. They shared the same deep brown eyes, the same high cheekbones and freckles and wild curls, but so often lately he looked at his sister and he hardly recognized her. She softened enough around him that he had not seen it at first, the way her sunshine had turned into sharp light, still sparkling but harsh in a way it had not always been. Where once she had been a wild dreamer, now she was a fighter, as if she'd fought so hard for her dreams she had forgotten them and only kept the person they made her. For a moment, Eli wondered if she saw the same hardness in him. Casina is not the same for me as it is for you, Dinar finally said. Our mother and father are not the same. To her, I am a child without magic. To him, I am an eldest daughter who refused her familial duty. I know they love me, but I also know they will never understand me. I know they heard what everyone in Casina said, and they wondered if it was true, if they had done something wrong, if they should have stepped in sooner. She took a shaky breath, and Eli realized she was trying not to cry. Instinctively, he shifted closer, but she shook her head. They never wondered if maybe it wasn't true. They never wondered if maybe I needed protection from the city instead of the other way around. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she seemed determined not to let them fall. Eli felt like he might cry. How had he not known his sister felt this way all these years? The gossip and the arguments were so distant he hardly recalled them. He pictured Dinar riding out with the cattle, calling out jokes or daring him to sing drinking songs when other farmers wandered within earshot, testing how long she could stand on her saddle and dance before her horse left her in the dirt, telling him all the ways she would change the world if only she were given the chance. Had she really been hurting all that time? Dinar laughed darkly, apparently reading this on his face. You don't even remember. I didn't know. Do you know how exhausting it is to try and never be seen for who you are? She asked him. Bloody stars, I was so tired of never being enough. Dean, it came out cracked, barely a whisper. Not you, she said hollowly. I know you see me. I know you love me the right way. Eli didn't know what that meant, so he just nodded. You're so good. She smiled, but it looked sad. They don't just love you, they adore you, with your magic and your kind words, and she sighed. Anyway, I knew it would be hard to explain. I didn't want to. She waved a hand through the air. Shatter your memories by telling you it wasn't as special for me. Eli's mind was racing, trying to fit these pieces together. So, he said slowly, that's why you left? That's a conversation for another day, she answered softly. A dark, sick feeling settled in his stomach. He wanted to shake her and demand answers, but he was suddenly terrified of what he would learn. You can tell me, he said, his voice sounding distant even to his own ears. I want to understand. Dinar only hummed in reply. Her eyes no longer met his. He decided to take a try leading the conversation. So when we went back to Casina together and Mother turned us down, it was not a happy trip for you? It was fine. I was glad to see them. But being back there, her gaze traced a string of low clouds. She sighed softly. It doesn't feel like home anymore. And while you were arguing with Mother, I was arguing with Father. We weren't arguing, Eli corrected. Dinar rolled her eyes. We weren't. She disagreed with me very politely. Oh, curse stars. Dinar exhaled dramatically. Everything she does is polite. I wish she would give up on her damn rules and do something meaningful. Dean, Eli pleaded, even though he agreed. Please try to be more patient with her. She means well. She finally took her eyes off the sky and spun sideways to face him. Eli, she said flatly, I love you very much, but there is a point at which complacence cannot be confused with good intentions. Don't condescend to me. Don't act like a child. Dinar. She shrugged and turned away again, leaning back on her elbows and stretching her legs out. Sorry, she bit out. You're not acting like a child. You're just so quick to defend her. I have to, Eli admitted. It was worth the extra effort to understand why his mother had chosen her path. She had given him too much for him to resent her now. Dinar just nodded. She either understood this or did not have the energy to ask. Mordez made me feel so angry. Her chin tilted up and she closed her eyes. The sun glinted over her profile and teased at her dark curls. Her magic felt so powerful, so... Dinar was silent for another moment, thinking. Eli waited. The magic felt like it was hers. Does that make any sense? Yes, Eli answered immediately. And it did. She had named the feeling that had stirred in his stomach so easily. Sorceresses and sorcerers were meant to carry the earth's power, not adopt it as their own. He had always thought that this was just another one of his mother's old-fashioned ways of describing sorcery, but when he felt the remnants of Mordez in the camp, he had known this was not the magic his mother practiced. This was the work of someone wielding a weapon, tossing around the earth and the sky like treasures all her own. It felt different, he agreed, unable to find better words to describe it. Unnatural. Unnatural, Dinar repeated. And so, so strong. You should have seen her, Eli. You will, I suppose. I'm sure she'll be back. Her eyes were still closed, lashes brushing the tops of her cheeks. It was different from Sulin, but it was the same, too. Just another selfish display of magic that could have been used to save this kingdom. Eli frowned. It still could save it, he pointed out. Mordez agreed to ally with us, right? Yes, but I don't trust her. The general does. Dinar's eyes snapped open. She took a hard breath in through her nose. How is Ari? What? Eli suddenly found the sun's heat unbearable. How is she? Dinar asked again. He knew he was going to have to report out to Mateo and the others soon, but the thought of that was quickly becoming an overwhelming one. I think she's okay, he said slowly. What happened? Dinar said immediately. Something happened. No. Why did it sound like a question? Had something happened? No, he repeated more firmly. She stayed, obviously. They will all want to know exactly what she said and how, Dinar reminded him. You should get your story straight before we ride back. Eli could probably repeat every word Ari had spoken to him, reenact every look, every touch, but little of that would be useful to the General's council. He missed her already. The way she had laughed a little, like she was shaking off her loneliness with him. The way she tried so hard to lift the darkness from his shoulders as he was searching for a way to lift it from hers. How could one person make him feel so settled and so lost all at once? The sun was so hot out here, even with the breeze. Nothing like the gentle caress of the sunrise over the Belem. Eli thought about the reverence on Ari's face as they had watched the sun come up, the way everything had felt right for just a few minutes. Do you ever wonder at it? Dinar's voice was low and lilting, almost dreamlike, as she gazed up at the clouds. Eli tried to remember what they had been talking about, but his mind kept returning to Ari's eyes as she'd smiled right before he left. The way they glittered a beautiful, cool blue. A gift. I would go back for you, and then you could stay. Eli, Dinar said forcefully, are you ignoring me, or do you need me to leave you alone with your daydreams? There was a particular emphasis on this last word that made him sit up quickly. He brushed the grass off his elbows and shot his sister a glare. It's not like that. She raised an eyebrow, still reclined with her arms behind her head. It isn't, he protested, nearly wincing at the way his voice lurched into a whine. Oh, on Rinthorn's grave, Dinar sighed. You're not fooling anyone, least of all me. What were you asking me? He asked, forcing a smile onto his face to soften the sharpness leaching into his words. Dinar gave a grin that verged on wicked, her eyes still trained on the sky. I was thinking about Ari, she told him sweetly. Remember her? Small, blonde woman with a grumpy bobcat always at her side? No, Eli deadpanned. I can't say I recall, what did you say her name was? Amy? Dinar cast him a sideways look, rolling her eyes. Her chuckle turned into a sigh, as if anyone could forget her. So many warring thoughts immediately sprung into his mind he could not quite pick one to tease out in a reply. Right, he offered blandly, trying to determine the best course of action. She was right, of course. It was only a week ago that Eli had spoken with Odon on this subject. But this was different. Dinar was different, and Ari had asked him to stay. Ari had... Do you ever feel the world is hers and we're all living in it? Dinar asked. Does it bother you how many minds she occupies even when she's not around? Eli watched his sister for a long moment. She was watching one cloud drift overhead. He could see her eyes following it as her fingers twisted into the short grass, biting at the dirt below. For a few seconds he could feel her pain and longing, could understand it in a way he rarely did. Eli had never wanted anything grand or bold or powerful, but Dinar, she had wanted everything. He thought she probably still did. No, he said softly. Ari was the first person who made me feel like this was my world, or at least it could be. Dinar's fingers stilled. Her eyes stared upward, but they didn't follow the clouds anymore. Ari did that? She asked. Her voice was so soft, so fragile. He heard the question she couldn't bring herself to speak. Yes, he whispered back, but Dean, you don't have to say it. Her words were somehow quiet and sharp all at once. I know what I did. I know I can't change it. Eli's heart squeezed painfully. Dean, he whispered again. Finally, his sister turned her head, gaze finding his. Looking into her eyes was like being home in Parisian, like being wrapped in his mother's arms or hearing his father's chuckle from the kitchen. Something settled in his chest. You taught me to dream, he told Dinar. And Ari taught me that my dreams could be real. Does that make sense? She gave him a weak smile, settling back into the grass. I have a shift in an hour. I've got to get some food before then. Do you want to come? I think I'll stay here a while longer. She could not or would not meet his eye. Eli settled for a shoulder squeeze and got to his feet. All right, I'll see you tonight. That's where the passage stops.
Thank you so much, Allison. I really love that kind of immersion into a relationship, almost like these character studies just from that passage. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. At this time, now we'll have our final reader, who is Ebony Stewart. Ebony is an international touring interdisciplinary poet, writer, and performance artist. Her work speaks to the Black experience with emphasis on gender, sexuality, womanhood, queer positivity, and race, with the hopes to be relatable, remove shame, keep minds, encourage dialogue, and inspire folks in marginalized communities. Ebony was 2017 Woman of the World Poetry Slam champion, has performed in 49 states and at over 200 colleges and universities across the country and internationally. She's the author of Blood Fresh, Homegirlhood, and Love Letters to Bald Fists. Her work has been featured in Button Poetry, Afropunk, For Harriet, Teen Vogue, The Texas Observer, Houston Public Media, The Breakbeat Poets Volume 2, Black Girl Magic, 2021 Colorism Healing Writing Contest, Write About Now Poetry, plus countless others. As a playwright, Ebony's one-woman shows, Hunger and Ocean, have received B. Iden Payne Awards and the David Mark Cohen New Play Award. Today, she'll be reading from her newly released manuscript, Wash, and one poem from a forthcoming project about grief. She worked on both while in residency with Atmosphere Press, and I'm so excited to say we'll hear more now from Ebony herself.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much for having me. I appreciate this. I think we should, in some ways, I really want to go back to doing virtual shows. I'm just saying, if I don't got to leave my house, it do my body good. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I appreciate y'all putting this on for us and bringing us together and everybody that's here. Y'all have been so I don't know how y'all been feeling because y'all ain't put it in the chat. So I would like you to actually let us know how you feeling because cut it out. We're doing this because we want to actually have the feels, right? I have a lot of people and friends that is in the on here, and I just want to say thank you to them for also showing up. Allison, like your work really created a lot of imagery for me, and so thank you for that. And of course, the beautiful Carlos is work is always so gushing and honest and pure. So thank you so much for that as well. I want to share from Wash. So I have it here with me. This is my newest baby, y'all. This is my child. And so I really want to be able to, share a few poems from that, or not even a few, that's a lot, because a few in most cases is 3. I likely will just be reading 1. So yeah, this is Shopping While Hungry. Be honest. Salt, pepper. Tell that one person you love them but cannot be a distraction for them right now. 3 carrots. Y'all sound good together. Grab 1 more carrot. Shit even look good together. Spicy too. 1 green chile, but we've all seen dishes whose looks don't match its taste. 1 celery stalk. 3 potatoes. Ain't even fully learned how to love yourself. 1 canned Hunt's roasted tomatoes sound crazy. Demanding love from somebody else though. 48-ounce beef broth. Your heart is a measuring cup, but you keep telling yourself you don't measure up. Portions. I gotta live here. Beef tips. I gotta take all this home to live with me. When you cooking, you expected to feed somebody. Let them sit at your table. Let them eat from every clean dish you got Tupperware, but ain't never no leftovers. Italian dressing. If you eat alone, they call you boring or lonely. It's sad here. Keep telling yourself you ain't enough company to keep. 15 items or less. Self-check. Flour. Gotta protect myself. I'm a woman that come with a whole lot of flavor. You tasty, girl. Damn, girl, you delicious. You got all kind of seasoning. Put your whole foot and the kitchen sink in. Taste so good. Make me want to sop you up with a biscuit, stupid. 15 items or less got a line now. You ain't bring nobody with you to the store, so you got to wait in the back of the line now, stupid. Practice patience. Practice forgiveness. You ain't got to want everybody that wants you back now. You'll get what you deserve. Self-check. Speak positivity into your life now. Ice cream. You sweet enough, girl. But what if you want something thick and sweeter than the savory plantains you got at home? Man, what go good with aches, a watering tongue, a sweet tooth? You be a glutton for punishment. Maybe you should just get some frozen yogurt. You know you've been trying to watch your weight. You know you've been trying to fit into that dress. You know you ain't got nowhere to wear that dress to. Anyway, girl, where you learn to forget yourself like that? Where you learn shame like that? You know what? You need to have a garage sale. You need to get rid of some of this stuff. 15 items or less, self-check. You need to remember you cost more than all this stuff. Your love is worth more than the things that tried to buy you. You know what your problem is? You treat your self-worth like junk food. Substitute those tears for cran apple juice. This look like a house that would have some cran apple juice. Substitute I'm sorry for I'll do better. Substitute let me talk, but listen to me, please. Instead of I want this to work, say, I honestly just don't want to waste my time sacrificing my heart while giving away my body while you get my peace. Man, it's exhausting being with you. Tonight, I'm cooking something yummy for myself. Tonight, I'm gonna quit going hungry, feed the craving. Tonight, I'm gonna make sure I'm full. What I can tell you is that I work simultaneously on both of those works, as far as like I worked on Wash and I worked on this grieving project, right? And it was really an interesting time for me because just to give you a little bit of a backstory, right? I had never actually done a residency before. So winning it, you know, it was kind of like winning the lottery to me. I'm like, what? And I also had never been to Costa Rica before, right? So I was like, oh, Atmosphere Press, show up, you know what I mean? And it was all because, you know, my work felt super validated and appreciated by Atmosphere Press that I was chosen. That's how I genuinely feel about it, right? I go there at a time where my dad had just passed away in May of 2022. And so, you know, I was like, okay, what, you know, what can I possibly do with myself? And then I get this residency and I'm going there and I'm actually grieving, right? I'm in a time of grief. And both of my parents are cancers. And my dad's birthday is July 11th. My mom's birthday is July 13th. I show up at this time of this residency. And of course, some of you might have heard how Carlos described, you know, the setting. It's very picturesque. It's very postcard friendly. You understand what I mean? And you get your own private deck, and it's like this lovely, like bungalow type feel to it. But then you have a private beach, and there, to Allison's point, and some of the things that they were describing is like there was a lot of sky gazing for me. Just the sky seemed so massive. But there was this one particular day that I was out there, and I really wanted to allow myself a chance to relax. Because I think oftentimes when you're a writer, you think you're just supposed to be writing all the time. But I really needed my mind and my heart to kind of realign themselves. And so there was a lot of fresh air that was happening, a lot of, you know, just like I said, sky gazing and sitting, laying in the sun and just kind of like feeling my feelings, if you will. And I went inside one day and I closed a little sliding door because the pool is like right there, like you just walk to the pool or whatever. And so I closed the sliding door and I heard this scratching sound. Now I'm not a scary person. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I'm not a scary person. It really take a lot for me to get scared, but I didn't know what that scratching was. Okay, and in my culture, we don't stick around and go back and look and see what it is, baby. That's not what we do. We get out of there. But I'm in another country, so I'm like, what am I supposed to do with myself? And so I didn't go check or nothing. I just was like, hopefully it stops. I'm just not gonna go back outside. And then the next day it happened again. And I was standing closer to the door when it was happening. So I just looked down to see if I could see like what is making that scratching sound. And it was a crab, an actual crab had come all the way up to um the little patio area. And it was so like, wow, this is crazy because my both of my parents are cancers. My father just died, and excuse me, there's like life happening outside. But I thought, you know, like, wow, maybe that's my dad. And I just burst into tears and had like a whole moment with myself to take care of myself and also to just appreciate and admire nature that was happening. There were so many different sounds that I hadn't heard of. I rented like this little golf cart because that's how they do out there, baby. They rent these golf carts. You just be down the street in the wind, honey. And so I did a lot of that. I ate a lot of different foods. But I really allowed myself to experience the atmosphere, right, of how where you are changes your writing and how you write about things based on location. You know what I mean? And so even though I was grieving and having a really tough time, there was also this moment where I was able to, write about things in such a beautiful way that was super painful. So this is a work that has not released yet. It's not in anything, because I'm still working on this grief project because grief is not linear. But it's called Grief is in Everything You Do. Every day is my new anniversary with grief. Blank days and grieving. Everything I do is in grief, and I am told, if you grieve while crying, you're doing it right. While eating, you're doing it right. While sleeping, you're doing it right. While thinking, you're doing it right. All the books about grief say, there are no right or wrong ways to grieve, say, don't hold in the grief though. Let the grief let the grief fall off the bones. Eat your grief, even if you're not hungry. Exercise your grief, even when you don't feel like moving. Talk about your grief with your loved ones, even if they don't understand a grief like this one or have anything to say about grief at all. Engage in grief with spiritual rituals and thinking, even if you're mad at God, don't believe in God, and don't know what God was thinking in the first place. Anyways, sometimes I watch funny things on TV and sob with grief. When emails hope to find me well, I don't remind them that I'm grieving. I just grieve and get things done because grief is in everything I do. And I guess it's always been there, but not like this. This grief changed everything. My therapist says, I'm grieving, so I should let my grief grieve. Grief takes its time. 1 minute I'm fine, and the next minute I'm not. Don't mind me. I'm just experiencing my grief and trying not to grieve or get my grief on anyone. And I swear I'm still fun despite the grief or grieving. They say I'm supposed to get my grief up and about. So I take my grief out dancing. Pour me a glass of grief on the rocks, please. It's okay. I'm only going to grieve a little bit more than I was already grieving. Besides, the grief would be there even if I wasn't drinking. So, you know what? F it. You get a grief. You get a grief, and you get a grief. A round of grief for everyone. Trust me, you're grieving. You just don't know it yet. We pose for a picture and smile with grief. I laugh so hard. Everyone thinks I've forgotten how to feel my grief, which is good because I don't want to make people feel bad about my grief. My grief is not their responsibility. The grief belongs to me. I pack up my grief and leave in an Uber. I never used to get drunk before I started grieving, but now I only grieve and drive when I'm sober. Once I'm home alone, I hydrate with grief in silence, huck the grief up the stairs while hurling explicit grief, stupid grief. I hate grief, but at least we still had fun like I told you we would. And you think my mouth would bow and heave grief from its throat, but I only drank enough to grieve. They say water helps with grief, and I guess it does, but no matter how hard I scrub, you can still smell the grief on me. There's always a little bit of grief left on my tongue. I flop into bed huffing with grief without permission and without trying. A single tear slips from my left eye with pride. I'm so good. I'm really good at grieving. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebony. I mean, you can see it in the chat again, but really that was very moving. So again, thank you so much for that reading. So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if you've got a question for one or more of our writers, please go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We do have a couple questions already. This first question is for all three writers. What did you learn about yourself through the process of writing these projects? I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So Carlos, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, of course, I get crap from my partner for always like invoking quotes that I can't cite, which I'm not doing on purpose, but it feels like it fits. So someone please correct me or cite this, but you know, that famous quote that says the author or the writer who begins a piece is not the same writer who finishes it. whether it's like a book or a poem or something else. And I really resonate with that. I mean, a lot of, as I kind of talked about before, a lot of these poems are wrestling with things that I think can't be captured in language, which A, is setting me up for failure, but B, I think is demanding a kind of disorientation that leads to growth. And so I think hopefully I'm working, as Chen says, I'm trying to catch up to my poems. And so I think the person that I am on the other side of a lot of these poems is not the person who began those poems. And I'm hoping that whoever receives them or listens to them or reads them can find a window or a door for themselves.
Absolutely. And Allyson, what about you? What did you kind of learn about yourself through the process of writing this series?
Yeah. I had the privilege of speaking with Ebony before I went, and that was incredible. You're reading just now. And she gave me a lot of really good advice, which honestly I credit with some of the success that I found there, and just as far as how to think about my time as not necessarily being a time where I have to, hit X number of pages or words or whatever metrics we too often use to quantify our work, but more as a space to be thoughtful and be creative, even if it means you didn't write a single word the entire time. And I think I'm not a full-time author. I have other work as well. And so for me, I feel like that piece of me can sometimes get buried, and then I feel less like myself in those periods. And so having this opportunity to just like sit with my feelings and my experiences and think about the ways that I wanted to put them on the page was incredibly valuable. And I ended up being very productive from a word count perspective, but it was sort of like after giving myself that chance to just go in with a very blank canvas, or blank page, and just say like, as long as I have this time to just sit in it, that's all that matters. And I left and I like felt like a writer again in a way that I just really had not in so long, which was incredibly sort of healing and refreshing. And so I think that was a great takeaway for me, and also just reminded me that like that part of myself doesn't go away just because I'm having a hard time connecting with it for a little bit. And so that was really, really valuable.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers could stand to hear that. Actually, I think that's very just alleviating of anxieties and fears that pretty much every writer has. And so Ebony, also from you, what did you learn about yourself through the process of writing these projects?
Yeah, for sure. I actually share sentiments that Carlos and Allison shared already, but I feel like I learned more about the fact that I need more time to write. If I had less distractions, and less life happening, I could possibly just write more and feel very fulfilled in the writing, because I guess I just re-established that I feel fulfilled in writing, especially when I'm not distracted by life.
Yeah, it's another thing that I think a lot of writers really can relate to that way. So I'm really happy to hear that lent itself well to all three of you. Another question from the chat, again, to all three authors, did you find that the environment of Costa Rica inspired the writing you worked on while you were there? It's kind of related to what you all were just saying, but maybe now in reverse order. Ebony, starting us off with this one.
Yeah, for sure. I felt extremely inspired while being there, especially because there were so many things that were accessible. Like, I knew that I was going to go to these different restaurants to eat. And then I knew that I wanted to establish a certain kind of discipline with just the writing time that I had for the day. I knew that I wanted to go for walks. And I knew that those walks and the way that the weather changed also, because I went during the rainy season, right, of Costa Rica. And so I kind of just followed the day as how it was living, breathing, feeling to me, to, kind of encourage the actual writing itself. So I felt like I was super inspired, just being intentional and alive and then also watching how the people loved on each other or how familiar they were with each other. Granted a lot of grace to, for instance, Wash, to give my own self that grace as well.
Yeah, I think there's something very beautiful about this idea of kind of following the day instead of trying to mold it into what you need to kind of squeeze out of it. Allison, what about you? Did you find that that environment was particularly inspiring?
Yeah, a lot of my work has been very based in my experiences in nature, and so I don't think this was different. I think a lot of my like more profound feelings and thoughts sort of come out when I'm out in that space, and so I think that that kind of worked within the way I like to sort of sit and process. I wouldn't say that I had a lot, I didn't end up putting anything super specific from that, but it was kind of more of the broader feeling of just being out there. And I think one thing I really enjoyed, Ebony mentioned this, was the sound. It was kind of like a much better version of white noise, right? There was just like the waves and the birds, and there was always noise, but it was never this sort of um not drowning you out, just really sort of supplementing my own thoughts in a way that was really, really nice. And I think I kind of that really helped me think about things. And also just sort of the power of those storms in the ocean. It was really beautiful, and the way the colors would change. Um, it was very good for my creative process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised about this because you're all writers, but the sensory experience that you're all giving us through these descriptions is really amazing. It's really something else. Thank you for that. And Carlos, what about you? Was excuse me, the environment of Costa Rica particularly inspiring to the writing?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of echoing and building off of a lot of things that Ebony and Allison have said. I feel like indirectly I felt a lot of permission and inspiration from the sort of natural setting, the serenity, the stillness, the space and kind of expansiveness. Like Ebony, when you were talking about like sitting the sky gazing, whoo, I was like, were you with me at my residency? Like that there's like a little what's it called? Like a little bench. You know the little bench on the other side of the pool? I was like, who put this bench here and how much more perfect could it be? Like the amount of time I sat in this bench, it sounds weird. A bench does not sound romantic, but trust me, it's this like beautiful bench overlooking the most beautiful little cove you've ever seen in your life on this hill under this like, massive sky next to your like pool above, you know, your private beach and just all that space and all that sky. I'm a city kid, I'm a New Yorker who lives in Atlanta. So I don't hear natural sounds like that. I definitely don't hear waves in my everyday life or the storms like you do in Costa Rica. And it just unlocked, it's like parts of you that you don't know are constrained until they're unlocked. Or it's like an armor you don't know that you're wearing until you look down and it's next to you. And so I felt really inspired and really, really unlocked and opened by the natural environment there.
Yeah, I mean, it's that feeling of taking just a deep breath and then a load is released. I think that's very profound in the simplest way. We have time for one more question. This is again for all writers. Who or what are your writing inspirations? Allison, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. Yeah, I would say I don't I have sort of a strange variety. I like to think that I get inspired by different things in different people's work. So for me, it's been everything from like reading the Odyssey in high school and just like falling in love with the language there and the storytelling. I read a lot of fantasy, of course, growing up, so like Tolkien was a big inspiration. Um, but also like Jane Austen and like thinking about the way you can describe, little things about people and character that really like say a lot. A more contemporary author that I really love is Frederick Backman, who's a Swedish author. And I just really, really love the way he can turn a phrase and also the way he just pulls the humanity out of each of his characters. So I would say those are some of my favorites.
Absolutely, definitely some good recs to look into. And Carlos, what about you? Who or what are your writing inspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very much the influence of my father, who I feel like I don't think he would ever call himself an artist or a writer, though he's a very eloquent storyteller, like a lot of Colombians. But he's somebody who really values a wide range of just artistic mediums. And I remember as a kid, I think I kind of like resented him for the things he dragged me along to, but of course I really appreciate it now. Like in New York, he'd take me to all this different stuff. He'd take me to the ballet. He'd take me to Cafe Wha and tell me about, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin performing there. He'd take me to blues clubs and school me on blues. He'd take me to the opera. He'd take me to see the Harlem Boys Choir. And I mean, some of that stuff I loved, and some of that stuff I was kind of like, oh, but one thing he instilled in me was just everything is something that you can appreciate and can teach you and can nurture some part of you. And the stuff that might be more challenging for you or feel less accessible to you is something for you to pay attention to, because there might be something really powerful and profound there that you're not seeing initially. And I think one thing that's a forever source of inspiration, and I think especially with the kind of stories that I'm often telling, is oftentimes great filmmakers. And I'll just say two of my favorites ever, who I think are kind of on a planet by themselves, are Ava DuVernay and Barry Jenkins. I'm thinking of Origin most recently by Ava DuVernay, and of course Moonlight by Barry Jenkins, which is probably my favorite film ever made. And I just think the kind of nuanced, uncompromising, complex storytelling that they do, and the way they bring together all these different elements. If anybody ever asked me, like, what are you trying to do with a poem? I'd say, watch Selma by Ava DuVernay or Origin. To capture in language what Ava DuVernay is able to do as a filmmaker, as this virtuosic filmmaker, that's what I'm trying to do. Like, what am I trying to do? Like, watch Moonlight, the scene in the diner at the end. That's what I'm trying to do with a poem. And so those are many things I just named. I'm inspired by, like the artistry of someone doing, a pirouette, or someone playing a tenor saxophone, or watching Lionel Messi do a backwards pass in the World Cup. Like, all that will make me inspired and make me weep. But let me learn from all of it. Let me try to have all of that fuel in some way, what I'm trying to do with life.
Yeah, I love when writers talk about these non-writing inspirations like that, because there is so much artistry in everyday life. So I think that was a really eloquent way to put that. Thank you, Carlos. And Ebony, closing us out, who or what are your writing inspirations?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a life writer, so I get really charged up by just living life in general. But I like work that definitely gives me the permission to be honest and tell my own personal truth and narrative. Some of those would be like Nadazaki Shange, who wrote For Color Girls, Augustine Burroughs, who wrote Running with Scissors. He's the person that I really appreciate how he writes how he talks, you know what I mean? And there's no shame in like writing how you talk and saying the thing exactly as it is. I don't need a bunch of metaphors or a bunch of this and this and that. I can just give it to you plain and you get it. You know what I mean? It makes it that much more relatable and personable as well. I'm the daughter of a drummer. My dad was a drummer, so music has always been a part of my life. Whether that be in jazz or Sade or Erica Badu, just any type of music to create a new world in the pen, right? I really enjoy that, but I also don't want to don't want to count out the fact that I have some really, really dope friends that are still very much alive, and their work does the work for me and helps me to feel that much more generative. I'm alongside Allyson and Carlos, but there's also, Roya Marsh, who's in here, who just came out with daylight. And has daylight and savings time. So those Masaki is in here. Don, the poet, is in here. Shaki, like I have a lot of different people that I surround myself whose work does significant um, leaps and bounds and just taking risk. And so I like anybody's work that makes me feel like I can take those risks as well.
Absolutely. There's something kind of comforting in seeing that from someone else and knowing it can be done, right? Um, so I just wanted to comment one other question that came in from the chat. One attendee was asking, what's the best way to purchase the author's work so we can be sure that they are making the most on those sales? Um, I find that usually the best way to support an author is to place an order through an independent bookstore because typically those bookstores will then stock more copies of the book that way. But if any of you three writers want to chime in, if there's a particular way you prefer to receive support, like if you prefer people go through your website or a different retailer, feel free to let us know. Um, I know it can kind of vary, but definitely I know the independent bookstores is what a lot of authors will encourage people to do. But other than that, I just wanted to say thank you again to all three of these writers for being here with us today. So Carlos, Allyson, and Ebony, just being generous with your time and with these words and upcoming work. It's really exciting that we get that kind of sneak peek preview. And thank you to everybody in the audience also for being here and supporting these writers with us. It's always wonderful to see people participating in the chat and being excited to support monetarily like that. So thank you to everybody really for supporting. I also want to mention one more time that you can learn more about the Playa Flamingo Writing Residency and apply today at the link in the chat. I'll put it in there one more time for everybody so you can check that out. Please consider also checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. So we'll look forward to hearing from you. But until then, that's it for this reading. So have a great week, everyone.